The wind screamed like a dying animal across the Montana plains, and Tessa Calloway wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life stepping off that train in Miles City 3 days ago. Her fingers had gone numb an hour past, clutching the reins of the horse she had hired from the livery stable, and the blizzard had descended so quickly that she could barely see 5 feet in front of her face. The letters from Samuel York had painted such a different picture of Montana territory in the spring of 1884, full of wildflowers and sunshine and hope for a new beginning. Instead, she was going to freeze to death before she even reached his ranch, before she could meet the man who had proposed marriage through carefully written words on cream-colored paper. The horse beneath her stumbled, and Tessa felt herself sliding sideways in the saddle. Her whole body felt foreign to her now, wrapped in layers that had seemed adequate in the boarding house that morning, but proved woefully insufficient against the fury of a late spring storm. The stable hand had warned her not to go, had told her to wait it out, but she had been so eager to finally arrive at her destination after weeks of travel from Philadelphia. She had sold everything she owned, said goodbye to the only life she had ever known, and committed herself to this journey. Waiting another day had felt impossible. Now she would give anything to be back in that warm stable. Through the white chaos, a shape emerged, dark and solid against the swirling snow. Tessa blinked, trying to clear her vision, wondering if her mind was playing tricks on her. But no, there was definitely something there. A building. A barn, perhaps. She urged her horse forward, though the poor animal needed little encouragement to seek shelter. As they drew closer, she could make out more details. A large barn, a house beyond it, fences barely visible under mounting snow drifts. This had to be it. This had to be the York Ranch. Samuel had written that his property was 10 miles west of Miles City, and she had been riding west for hours. Tessa tried to call out, but her voice came out as barely a whisper, snatched away by the wind. She slid from the saddle, her legs buckling beneath her when her feet hit the ground. She managed to grab the saddle horn to keep from falling completely, then forced herself to move toward the house. Each step felt like walking through molasses, her body protesting, begging her to just lie down in the snow and rest. The door. She had to reach the door, her fist connected with the solid wood, though she could barely feel the impact. She pounded again, putting all her remaining strength into it. The world tilted, and she found herself leaning against the doorframe, her cheek pressed against the frozen wood. The door opened so suddenly that she nearly fell inside. Strong hands caught her, and she found herself staring up into a face that could have been carved from stone. Hard angles, a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, and eyes the color of storm clouds that widened in surprise at the sight of her. What in God's name? The voice was deep and rough, matching the face perfectly. Samuel York, Tessa managed to ask through chattering teeth. I am Tessa Calloway, your bride. The man stared at her for a long moment, and something flickered across his face that she could not quite read. Then he was moving, pulling her fully inside, kicking the door shut behind her against the wind. We need to get you warm, he said, and she noticed he had not confirmed or denied his identity. But that thought drifted away as he led her closer to the massive stone fireplace that dominated one wall of the main room. A fire roared there, and Tessa had never seen anything so beautiful in her entire life. He guided her to a chair pulled close to the hearth, then crouched down in front of her, his hands moving to the buttons of her coat. I need to get these wet things off you. You understand? You are half frozen. Tessa nodded, though she was not entirely sure she did understand. Everything felt distant and strange, as though she was watching this happen to someone else. She let him remove her coat, her gloves, her traveling bonnet. His movements were efficient but gentle, the hands large and calloused but careful. "Your horse," she mumbled. "Outside." "I will get the horse once I know you are not going to die in my house," he said bluntly. He disappeared for a moment and returned with several thick blankets, wrapping them around her shoulders and tucking them around her body. "Can you feel your fingers and toes?" Tessa tried to wiggle them. Her feet felt like blocks of ice in her boots, and her fingers burned with the beginning of sensation returning. "Starting to. Good. That is good." He moved to a cabinet and returned with a bottle and a small glass. He poured a generous amount of amber liquid and pressed the glass into her hand, closing her fingers around it. "Drink this. All of it." She sipped, and the whiskey burned down her throat, making her cough. But it also spread warmth through her chest, and she took another sip, then another, until the glass was empty. "Better?" he asked, watching her intently. "Yes, thank you." She studied him now that her vision was clearing. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build that spoke of hard physical labor. His hair was dark, almost black and longer than was fashionable, touching his collar. He wore simple clothes, a work shirt and trousers held up by suspenders, all clean but well worn. "Are you Samuel York?" He was quiet for a moment, then stood and walked to the window, looking out at the storm. "I am Samuel York, and you should not have come in this weather. What were you thinking?" "It was not snowing when I left Miles City this morning," Tessa said, feeling defensive despite her exhaustion. "The weather changed quickly. It does that here." He turned back to her. "You said you are Tessa Calloway, my bride." "Yes, we have been corresponding for 6 months. You asked me to come when the weather improved. Your last letter said spring had arrived and I should come as soon as I could arrange passage." She watched his face carefully. "You did send those letters, did you not?" Samuel crossed his arms over his chest. "I sent them. I just did not expect you to arrive during a blizzard half dead on my doorstep. Nor did I expect to arrive in such a state." She pulled the blankets tighter around herself. "But here we are." A ghost of something that might have been amusement crossed his face. "Here we are indeed." He moved toward the door. "I need to see to your horse. Stay by the fire. Do not fall asleep until I am certain you are not suffering from frostbite." He shrugged into a heavy coat and pulled on thick gloves, then wrapped a scarf around his face before opening the door. The wind roared in, bringing with it a swirl of snow, and then he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him. Tessa sat very still, trying to absorb what had just happened. She had finally arrived. After all the planning, all the fear and excitement and doubt, she was actually here, in Samuel York's house. The man himself was not quite what she had imagined from his letters. Those had been thoughtful and articulate, full of descriptions of his ranch and his hopes for the future. They had revealed a lonely man seeking companionship, someone to share his life with. But they had not prepared her for the sheer physical presence of him, the intensity of his gaze, the barely contained energy that seemed to radiate from him even when he stood still. She looked around the room, taking in her surroundings more fully now. The house was solid and well built, clearly made by someone who knew what they were doing. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large table surrounded by chairs, the fireplace with its comfortable seating, and a cooking area with a cast iron stove. Shelves lined one wall, filled with books and a few personal items. Everything was tidy and organized, which surprised her somehow. She had expected a bachelor's chaos. 2 doors led off from the main room. Bedrooms, she assumed. Her stomach fluttered with nerves at the thought. Samuel had written that they could have a proper courtship before marrying if she wished, that there was no pressure. But she was here now, in his house, in the middle of a blizzard. There was no going back to town, no respectable boarding house to retreat to while they got to know each other. The door opened again, and Samuel entered, snow covering him from head to foot. He shook himself off and removed his outer layers, hanging them on hooks by the door. "Your horse is in the barn, fed and watered. It is a decent animal. Did you buy it or hire it?" "Hired it from a livery in Miles City. The owner said he knew you, actually. Mr. Henderson. Tom Henderson. Yes, I know him." Samuel moved to the stove and poured himself a cup of coffee from a battered pot. "He should have told you not to go out in this weather." "He did tell me." "I did not listen." Samuel looked at her over the rim of his cup, and this time she was certain she saw amusement in his eyes. "Stubborn, are you?" "Determined," she corrected. "There is a difference." "Not much of one." He set down his cup and pulled another chair close to the fire, sitting down with a sigh. "I am sorry for the poor welcome. This is not how I imagined your arrival." "Nor I." Tessa hesitated, then asked, "Were you expecting me at all? You seem surprised." "Your last letter said you would arrive in late April or early May. Today is April 7th. I thought I had more time to prepare." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I was going to have the house cleaner, food prepared, something better than this. The house is perfectly clean. And I am just grateful to be warm and safe." She meant it. "Thank you for taking me in." Samuel gave her an odd look. "You are my intended bride. Where else would you go? Still, thank you." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. Tessa studied Samuel's profile, trying to reconcile this man with the words on the pages she had read and reread dozens of times. He seemed harder somehow, more rough around the edges than she had pictured. But there was something compelling about him too, something that drew her attention and would not let go. "You must be hungry," Samuel said suddenly, standing up. "When did you last eat?" Tessa tried to remember. "Breakfast, I suppose. At the boarding house before I left Miles City." He muttered something under his breath that sounded uncomplimentary about her decision-making skills, but moved to the kitchen area and began pulling out supplies. "I can make you something hot." "Nothing fancy, but it will fill your stomach." "I can help," Tessa offered, starting to stand. "You can sit and get warm," Samuel said firmly. "You are still half frozen." He was probably right. Her feet were starting to hurt as sensation returned, a burning prickle that made her want to cry. But she had cried enough in her life. She had not come all this way to be weak. She watched Samuel work, noting the competent way he moved around the kitchen. He sliced potatoes and onions, added them to a pan with bacon grease, then cracked several eggs over the top. The smell made her mouth water. Within minutes, he was placing a plate of food in front of her, along with thick slices of bread and butter. "Eat," he commanded, then went to make a plate for himself. Tessa did not need to be told twice. The food was simple but delicious, and she realized just how hungry she actually was. She cleaned her plate quickly, then accepted a second helping when Samuel offered it without comment. When they had both finished eating, Samuel collected the plates and took them to a basin to wash. "The storm is not going to let up anytime soon. You will have to stay here tonight. I have 2 bedrooms. You can have mine and I will sleep out here by the fire." "I cannot take your bedroom," Tessa protested. "You can and you will. It is not up for discussion." His tone was firm but not unkind. "Tomorrow, once the storm clears, we can discuss arrangements going forward. Figure out what happens next." What happens next? The words hung in the air between them. Tessa knew what was supposed to happen next. They were supposed to get married, start a life together, build a future on this ranch in the middle of Montana territory. But suddenly, faced with the reality of this man and this situation, she felt uncertain in a way she had not before. "All right," she agreed quietly. "Thank you for your hospitality." Samuel nodded and went back to washing dishes. Tessa watched him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the rigid set of his jaw. He was uncomfortable with her presence here. That much was clear. Whether it was because of the impropriety of the situation or something else, she could not tell. "I should warn you," Tessa said, breaking the silence. "I am not very good at taking orders." Samuel paused in his washing, then resumed scrubbing a plate. "I gathered that when you ignored Tom Henderson's advice about the storm. I mean in general. I know you are probably expecting a biddable wife who will do whatever you say without question. But that is not who I am. I should have made that clearer in my letters." He set down the plate and turned to look at her fully. "I am not looking for a servant, Miss Calloway. I can hire those if I need them. I am looking for a partner, someone to share this life with. Someone with thoughts and opinions of their own. If I wanted someone to simply obey my every command, I would have gotten a dog." Tessa felt her lips twitch in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Good. That is good to know. Although I would appreciate if you would use common sense when it comes to matters of safety. Riding out into a blizzard alone is not sensible." Point taken. He returned to his dishes, and Tessa felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. Perhaps this would work after all. Perhaps they could find a way to make a life together here, despite the awkward beginning. By the time Samuel finished cleaning up, full darkness had fallen outside, though it was barely past 6 in the evening. The storm raged on, rattling the windows and finding every crack in the walls to whistle through. But inside, the house remained warm and secure, the fire casting dancing shadows across the walls. Samuel showed Tessa to his bedroom, carrying in one of her bags that he had retrieved from her horse. The room was spare but comfortable, with a large bed covered in quilts, a dresser, and a washstand. Everything was neat and orderly, much like the rest of the house. "There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up," Samuel said from the doorway. "Privy is out back, but I would not recommend trying to get to it tonight. There is a chamber pot under the bed if you need it." Tessa felt her cheeks heat at such frank discussion, but nodded. "Thank you." Samuel hesitated, as though he wanted to say something else, then simply nodded and pulled the door closed behind him. Tessa sat down on the edge of the bed and let out a long breath. She was here. She had actually done it. Left everything she knew behind to come west and marry a stranger. The reality of it was only now starting to sink in. She changed into her nightgown, shivering as the cold air hit her skin, then quickly climbed under the quilts. The bed was comfortable, and it smelled faintly of pine and soap and something else that she realized must be Samuel himself. It was not unpleasant. Actually, it was rather comforting. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the storm and the small sounds of Samuel moving around in the main room. Eventually, those sounds stopped, and she assumed he had settled down to sleep. Only then did she finally let herself relax, her exhausted body pulling her down into sleep. She woke once in the night, disoriented and confused about where she was. Then it came back to her in a rush, and she lay still in the darkness, aware that her life had fundamentally changed. There was no going back now. She could only move forward into whatever the future held. Morning came gray and still. The storm had passed sometime in the night, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Tessa stood at the window, looking out at the drifts that came halfway up the porch railings, at the white blanket covering everything as far as the eye could see. "It should melt off in a day or two," Samuel said from behind her, and she jumped, not having heard him approach. "Sorry. Did not mean to startle you. It is all right, I was just wool gathering." She turned to face him. He had clearly been up for a while, already dressed and looking ready to start the day. "How long have you been awake?" "A few hours." I needed to check on the livestock, make sure the barn held up through the storm. He moved to the stove and poured 2 cups of coffee, handing one to her. There is oatmeal if you are hungry. Thank you. Tessa accepted the coffee gratefully. Did everything survive the storm all right? Seems so. Lost a section of fence that I will need to repair, but the animals are fine. He leaned against the counter, studying her. We should talk. Tessa's stomach tightened. All right. This is not how things were supposed to start between us. You were supposed to arrive, and we were supposed to have time to get to know each other properly, to court, but the circumstances have put us in a difficult position. Because I spent the night here alone with you, Tessa said bluntly. It is not proper. It is not. And in a small community like this one, word travels fast. By the time you could get back to town, assuming you could get back to town, everyone would know you spent the night here. Your reputation would be ruined. So you are saying we need to marry immediately? Samuel met her eyes steadily. I am saying that is one option. The other option is that you can still return to Philadelphia. I will give you the money for passage and enough to get established once you arrive. No one there needs to know what happened here. You can say it did not work out, that we did not suit, whatever you like. Tessa set down her coffee cup carefully. You would do that. Let me leave after you paid for my passage here. I would. I do not want you to feel trapped. His expression was serious, his eyes searching hers. This has to be your choice, Tessa, not something forced on you by circumstance. She took a moment to consider his words, to really think about what she wanted. The truth was, she had no desire to return to Philadelphia. There was nothing for her there anymore. Her mother had died 2 years ago, and her father had quickly remarried a woman who made it clear Tessa was no longer welcome in the house she had grown up in. She had been working as a seamstress, living in a tiny room above the shop, scraping by with barely enough to eat. When she had seen Samuel's advertisement seeking a bride, it had felt like a lifeline. But more than that, she had connected with his letters. The things he wrote about, his dreams for the future, his honesty about the challenges of life on a ranch, his desire for true partnership rather than just a woman to keep house. She had felt, reading his words, that perhaps she had found someone who could understand her, who could accept her as she was. Looking at him now, standing in his kitchen in the morning light, she felt that same pull. He was giving her a choice, giving her a way out if she wanted it. But she did not want it. I do not want to go back to Philadelphia, she said firmly. I came here to marry you, Samuel York, and that is what I intend to do if you will still have me. Something flickered in his eyes, something warm and almost hopeful. You are certain? I am certain. He nodded slowly. Then we should get married as soon as possible. The parson lives about 5 miles from here. Once the roads are passable, we can ride into town and make it official. All right. Tessa felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach, but also something else. Excitement, perhaps, or anticipation. This was really happening. The next 2 days passed in a strange sort of limbo. The snow began to melt as Samuel had predicted, but the roads remained muddy and difficult to traverse. They were essentially trapped together in the house, forced to learn to live in close quarters with a person who was still essentially a stranger. Tessa discovered that Samuel was a man of few words but deep thoughts. He would go hours without speaking, seemingly content with silence, but when he did talk, his words were thoughtful and interesting. He told her about the ranch, about the cattle he raised and the horses he trained. He spoke of his plans to expand, to build up the herd, to make this place into something substantial. She told him about her life in Philadelphia, about her mother's death and her father's remarriage, about the long hours spent sewing, and the loneliness that had become her constant companion. She spoke of her dreams, too, of wanting a place to belong, a purpose beyond just surviving day to day. They worked together to prepare meals, and Tessa was pleased to discover that Samuel did not expect her to simply take over all the domestic duties. He helped with the cooking and cleaning without complaint, and seemed genuinely interested in teaching her about ranch life. "If you are going to live here, you need to know how things work," he explained on the second day, as he showed her around the barn and introduced her to his horses. "You need to be able to handle things on your own if something happens to me, or if I need to be away from the ranch. You often need to be away, sometimes. Cattle drives, trips to buy supplies, things like that, cannot always be helped." He ran a hand along the neck of a beautiful chestnut mare. "This is Copper. She is gentle and good for riding. I thought she could be yours if you like." Tessa reached out tentatively to stroke the horse's velvety nose. "She is beautiful, but I should tell you I am not a very experienced rider." "I will teach you. It is necessary out here. You cannot walk everywhere." By the third day, the roads had dried enough that Samuel declared them passable. "We can go into Miles City today," he said over breakfast. "Talk to the parson, make it legal." Tessa set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. "Today, unless you have changed your mind." "No, no, I have not changed my mind. It is just happening so fast." Samuel regarded her seriously. "It does not have to happen today if you are not ready. But every day we wait is another day your reputation is in question. People will talk, Tessa. This is a small community and gossip spreads like wildfire. I know, you are right. Today is fine. Today is good." She took a breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I should wear my good dress. The blue one." "You would look beautiful in a flour sack," Samuel said, then looked startled, as though the words had escaped without his permission. Tessa felt warmth spread through her chest. It was the first compliment he had paid her, and it felt genuine in a way that elaborate flattery never had. "Thank you." They rode into Miles City side by side, Tessa on Copper and Samuel on his big black gelding. The town was small but bustling, with a main street lined with businesses and houses spreading out from the center. People stopped to stare as they rode past, and Tessa could see the speculation in their eyes. The parson's house was a tidy structure near the church, with a small garden already showing signs of spring growth. Samuel helped Tessa dismount, his hands strong and steady on her waist, and she found herself very aware of his proximity, of the heat of his body so close to hers. Parson Williams was a kind-looking man in his 50s, with silver hair and gentle eyes. His wife, Martha, was equally welcoming, ushering them inside with exclamations of delight. "Samuel York getting married at last," Martha said, beaming. "I never thought I would see the day." "And who is this lovely young woman?" "Tessa Calloway," Samuel said. "From Philadelphia. We have been corresponding, and she came west to be my bride." "How wonderful!" Martha clasped her hands together. "Though I heard you arrived during that terrible storm a few days ago." "You poor dear, you must have been frozen half to death." "Samuel took good care of me," Tessa said, meaning it. The parson cleared his throat. "Well, if you are here to be married, we should get to it. Do you have witnesses?" "We do not," Samuel admitted. "It was somewhat short notice." "No matter. Martha and I can stand as witnesses. We have done it many times before." The parson pulled out a large Bible and opened it to a marked page. "Shall we begin?" It happened so quickly that Tessa barely had time to process it. One moment she was standing in the parson's parlor, and the next she was repeating vows that would bind her to this man for the rest of her life. Samuel's voice was steady as he made his promises, his hand warm and solid as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. "You may kiss your bride," Parson Williams said with a smile. Samuel looked at Tessa, and she saw uncertainty flicker across his face. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a brief, chaste kiss that nonetheless made her heart race. "Congratulations," Martha said, pulling Tessa into a hug. "Welcome to Montana, Mrs. York, Mrs. York." Tessa had a new name now, a new identity. She was no longer Tessa Calloway from Philadelphia. She was Tessa York, wife of a Montana rancher. They stayed for tea and cake, Martha insisting on celebrating properly. The older woman peppered Tessa with questions about Philadelphia and her journey west, while the parson talked with Samuel about ranch business. It was all very normal and domestic, and Tessa found herself relaxing into it, enjoying the warmth of Martha's hospitality. Finally, they took their leave, with promises to visit again soon. As they rode back toward the ranch, Tessa was very aware of the ring on her finger, of the finality of what they had just done. "Are you all right?" Samuel asked, and she realized he had been watching her. "Yes, just thinking about how much my life has changed in such a short time." "Mine too." He was quiet for a moment. "I know this is not the wedding you probably imagined. No big ceremony, no fancy dress, no celebration." "I do not need those things," Tessa said honestly. "I just need a husband who will treat me with respect and kindness. Can you do that, Samuel?" "I can, I will." He held her gaze. "I cannot promise it will always be easy. Ranch life is hard and there will be challenges. But I can promise I will always be honest with you and I will do my best to make you happy. That is all I can ask." They arrived back at the ranch as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Samuel took care of the horses while Tessa went inside to start dinner. It felt strange and right all at once, this domestic routine they were beginning to establish. That night, after they had eaten and cleaned up, an awkward silence fell between them. They were married now, husband and wife, and that came with certain expectations. But Samuel made no move toward the bedroom, instead settling into his chair by the fire with a book. "Samuel," Tessa said softly, "we are married now. You do not have to sleep out here anymore." He looked up from his book, his expression unreadable. "I know, but I thought, given the rushed nature of things, you might want time to adjust, to get comfortable with the situation before we—" He trailed off. "Before we act like a real married couple." "Yes." Tessa considered this. Part of her was relieved at his consideration, at his willingness to give her time. But another part of her, the part that had been desperately lonely for so long, wanted to move forward, to embrace this new life fully. "I appreciate your thoughtfulness," she said carefully. "But I did not come all this way to have a marriage in name only. I want a real partnership, Samuel, in all ways." His eyes darkened and he set down his book. "You are certain?" "I am certain." He stood and crossed to her, offering his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. This time when he kissed her, it was not chaste or brief. It was deep and searching, full of longing and promise. Tessa felt heat bloom in her belly, spreading through her limbs, making her head spin. He pulled back, breathing hard. "I will try to be gentle, but I have to admit I do not have much experience with this sort of thing." "Nor do I," Tessa admitted. "I suppose we will figure it out together." And they did, stumbling their way through awkwardness and uncertainty to find something beautiful and intimate on the other side. Samuel was careful with her, attentive to her comfort, and Tessa found herself marveling at the vulnerability of it all, at the trust required to share yourself so completely with another person. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Samuel's arm around her waist, Tessa felt a sense of peace settle over her. She was home. This strange, cold territory was home now, and this quiet, intense man beside her was her husband. It was not what she had imagined her life would be, but it felt right in a way nothing else ever had. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Tessa learned the routines of ranch life, rising early to help with the animals before the heat of the day set in. Samuel proved to be a patient teacher, showing her how to collect eggs from the temperamental chickens, how to milk the cows, how to spot signs of illness in the livestock. She was not always graceful in her efforts, but she was determined, and slowly she began to feel competent. Samuel seemed surprised and pleased by her willingness to work alongside him. "Most city women would balk at this," he said one morning as they mucked out stalls together. "I am not most city women, and I told you I want to be a partner, not a burden." Tessa wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a smear of dirt behind. "Besides, there is something satisfying about this work, about seeing the results of your labor directly. You are full of surprises, Tessa York." She smiled at the use of her married name. She was still getting used to it, but it felt more natural every day. In the evenings, after the work was done and they had eaten dinner, they would sit by the fire and talk. Samuel slowly opened up to her, telling her about his childhood in Ohio, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16, about coming west to make a new start. He had worked for other ranchers for years, saving every penny, until he finally had enough to buy his own land and start building something of his own. "This ranch represents everything I have worked for," he told her one night. "Every dream, every sacrifice. Sometimes I cannot believe it is real, that it is actually mine." "Ours," Tessa corrected gently. "It is ours now." He looked at her, and something warm and tender filled his expression. "Ours," he agreed. Tessa shared her own stories too, though many of them were painful. She told him about her mother's illness, about watching her waste away slowly while her father retreated into work and drink. She told him about the stepmother who had made it clear Tessa was nothing but an inconvenience, about the years of loneliness and feeling like she did not belong anywhere. "You belong here," Samuel said firmly, taking her hand in his. "With me. You belong here, Tessa." She wanted to believe him, and more she was starting to. One afternoon in late May, Samuel announced he needed to ride into town for supplies. "Do you want to come with me?" he asked. "Or would you rather stay here?" "I will come," Tessa said immediately. She had been to Miles City only a handful of times since their wedding, and she was curious to see more of it, to meet more of the people who would be her neighbors and community. The town was busier than she had seen it before, with people bustling in and out of shops and gathering in small groups to chat. Samuel helped her down from Copper and tied both horses to the hitching post outside the general store. Inside, the store was dim and cool, packed with goods from floor to ceiling. A woman stood behind the counter, middle-aged with sharp eyes and a suspicious expression. "Samuel," she said, her tone cool. "I heard you got yourself a wife." "I did. This is Tessa." Samuel placed a hand on the small of Tessa's back, a gesture of support and possession both. "Tessa, this is Mrs. Henderson. She runs the store with her husband Tom." "Pleased to meet you," Tessa said, offering a smile. Mrs. Henderson looked her up and down, her expression not warming. "Philadelphia, I heard. That is a long way to come." "It is." "Must have been desperate to come all this way to marry a stranger." Tessa felt her spine stiffen. "I came here seeking a new start and a partnership with a good man. I believe I have found both." "Samuel is a good man, Mrs. Henderson agreed, her tone implying that Tessa was not a good woman. "I just hope you appreciate what you have got." "I do appreciate it. Every day." Tessa held the woman's gaze steadily. Samuel cleared his throat. "We need flour, sugar, salt, and coffee. Also some fabric if you have any in stock." "Tessa needs a new dress for summer." Mrs. Henderson pursed her lips but moved to gather the requested items. Tessa wandered the store, looking at the various goods on display. She stopped in front of a display of ribbon, running her fingers over the soft satin. "Get whatever you want," Samuel said quietly, appearing at her elbow. "Do not let her get to you. Some people around here are not very welcoming to outsiders." I can handle it. Tessa selected a length of blue ribbon that matched her eyes. I have dealt with far worse than unfriendly shopkeepers. Samuel smiled, and Tessa felt a flutter in her chest. His smiles were rare enough that each one felt like a gift. They paid for their purchases. Mrs. Henderson's manner remaining chilly throughout, and stepped back out into the sunshine. Samuel was loading their goods into the saddlebags when a voice called out. Samuel York, as I live and breathe. A man approached, tall and lean with sun-weathered skin and laugh lines around his eyes. He looked to be around Samuel's age in his late 20s, and he walked with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. Jack, Samuel said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice. I heard you were back in town. Got in last week. Spent the last 2 months down in Wyoming helping my cousin move his herd north. Jack turned his attention to Tessa, his eyes lighting with interest. And who is this lovely lady, my wife, Tessa? Tessa, this is Jack Stone. We worked together on the Morrison Ranch years ago before I bought my own place. Your wife, Jack's eyebrows shot up. Samuel York got married. The world truly is full of surprises. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. York. He swept off his hat and gave a little bow. Pleased to meet you as well, Mr. Stone. Please call me Jack. Any wife of Samuel's is a friend of mine. He turned back to Samuel. You old dog, keeping secrets. When did this happen? Last month. Tessa came out from Philadelphia. Mail order bride, Jack asked, then caught himself. Sorry, that was rude. But good for you, Samuel. You deserve some happiness. Thank you. Jack looked between them, his expression turning thoughtful. You know, there is a barn dance next Saturday at the Morrison place. You two should come. It would be a good chance for folks to meet Tessa properly, welcome her to the community. Samuel glanced at Tessa. What do you think? Are you up for a barn dance? Tessa thought about it. She was nervous about meeting so many new people at once, especially given Mrs. Henderson's chilly reception. But she could not hide at the ranch forever. She needed to start integrating into the community, making friends, establishing herself as Samuel's wife. I think that sounds lovely, she said. Excellent, Jack said. I will see you both there then. And Samuel, save a dance for me with your beautiful wife. I want to hear all about Philadelphia. After Jack walked away, Samuel finished loading the supplies in silence. Finally, as they were mounting their horses, he said, If you do not want to go to the dance, we do not have to. I know social gatherings can be exhausting. No, I want to go. Jack is right. It is a good opportunity for me to meet people. She paused. Unless you do not want to go, I am not much for dancing or socializing, but it is important for you and for us. He met her eyes. I want people to know you, to see what a remarkable woman you are. Tessa felt warmth spread through her chest. You think I am remarkable? I do. You came halfway across the country to marry a stranger. You have learned to manage a ranch without complaint. You work harder than most men I know, and you never ask for special treatment. Yes, Tessa, I think you are remarkable. She reached across the space between their horses and took his hand, squeezing it. Thank you. That means more than you know. The week leading up to the barn dance passed quickly. Tessa spent her days helping with the ranch work and her evenings sewing a new dress for the event. She had bought fabric in town, a soft cotton in a deep green that Samuel said matched the spring grass on the hillsides. She stayed up late by lamplight, her fingers flying over the stitches, determined to make something beautiful. On the day of the dance, she felt butterflies in her stomach as she dressed. The gown had turned out well, fitted at the bodice and flowing into a full skirt. She had used the blue ribbon from town to trim the neckline, and she wore her hair pulled back in a simple but elegant style. When she emerged from the bedroom, Samuel stared at her, his mouth slightly open. What? Tessa asked, suddenly self-conscious. Is it too much? No, not too much. You look beautiful, Tessa. Absolutely beautiful. He cleaned up well himself, she noticed. He had shaved and trimmed his hair, and he wore clean trousers and a shirt that looked new. He looked handsome and almost civilized, though there was still something untamed about him that no amount of grooming could hide. The Morrison ranch was larger than Samuel's, with a big barn that had been cleared out and decorated for the dance. Lanterns hung from the rafters, and a small group of musicians was setting up in one corner. People were already arriving, families in wagons and young couples on horseback. Samuel helped Tessa down, and they walked into the barn together. Conversation died down as people noticed them, and Tessa felt dozens of eyes turn their way. She lifted her chin and smiled, refusing to show her nervousness. An older couple approached, the man with silver hair and a kind face, the woman plump and welcoming. "Samuel, good to see you," the man said, shaking Samuel's hand. "And this must be your bride. I am Harold Morrison, and this is my wife Beatrice. Tessa York, pleased to meet you." "Welcome to Montana, dear," Beatrice said warmly. "We are so glad Samuel finally found someone. He has been alone out on that ranch for too long." More people came to introduce themselves, a dizzying array of names and faces that Tessa tried desperately to remember. There were other young couples, families with children, single cowboys and merchants from town. Some were friendly and welcoming like the Morrisons. Others were more reserved, watching her with suspicious or speculative eyes. The music started, and couples began to move onto the dance floor. Jack appeared beside them, grinning. "May I have this dance, Mrs. York?" "With your permission, of course, Samuel." Samuel looked at Tessa. "It is up to her." "I would be delighted," Tessa said, taking Jack's offered hand. Jack was a good dancer, leading her through the steps with easy grace. "So how are you finding Montana life?" he asked. "Different from Philadelphia, but I am enjoying it. Samuel has been teaching me about ranching." "Has he now?" Jack looked over at where Samuel stood watching them, his expression unreadable. "Samuel is a good man, but he can be hard to read sometimes. Keeps things close to the vest, if you know what I mean. I am learning that. Just know that underneath all that stoic silence, he feels things deeply. He just does not always know how to express it." Jack spun her, and she laughed. "I have known him for 8 years, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. You are good for him, Tessa." "I hope so." The dance ended, and Jack returned her to Samuel with a flourish. Then Samuel surprised her by taking her hand and leading her back onto the floor himself. "I am not a very good dancer," he warned. "Neither am I. We will muddle through together." And they did, moving somewhat awkwardly through a waltz, stepping on each other's feet occasionally but laughing about it. Tessa realized with a start that she was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way she had not been in years. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, noticing her expression. "I am thinking about how glad I am that I came here, how glad I am that I married you." His arms tightened around her. "I am glad too. I did not realize how lonely I was until you arrived and filled all the empty spaces." They danced until the musicians took a break, then stepped outside for some air. The night was cool and clear, the stars brilliant overhead. Samuel led her away from the barn, toward a small grove of trees where they could have some privacy. "Are you having a good time?" he asked. "I am. People have been mostly kind, and it is nice to feel part of a community again." "Good. That is good." He hesitated, then said, "There is something I need to tell you, something I should have mentioned before, but I did not know how to bring it up." Tessa felt a spike of fear. "What is it?" "I received a letter yesterday. From my brother. I did not even know he was alive until that letter arrived." "You have a brother, but you said your whole family died." "I thought they did. When the fever came through, it took my parents and my younger sister. My brother was away at the time, working in Chicago. By the time he heard what happened and came home, I was already gone. I left Ohio right after the funerals, could not stand to stay there with all the memories. We lost track of each other. But he found you, he found me. He wants to come visit to reconnect. He has a wife and a child now, a daughter. He wants us to meet. That is wonderful, Samuel. Tessa took his hands in hers. Why do you seem worried about it? Because I left. I ran away from everything, including him. He might be angry that I did not try harder to find him, to stay in touch. Or he might just be relieved to have found you again. You will not know until he arrives. She squeezed his hands. When is he coming? Next month, if the timing works out with his job. He is a clerk for a railroad company. Then we will have a month to prepare. We can get the house ready for guests, and I can practice my cooking so I do not poison anyone. Samuel laughed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Your cooking is fine, Tessa. It is adequate, but I want to be able to offer your brother and his family better than adequate. She smiled up at him. This is a good thing, Samuel. Family is important. I am glad you will have a chance to reconnect with yours. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I do not know what I did to deserve you. You advertised for a mail-order bride and got lucky. Very lucky. They stayed outside a while longer, enjoying the peace and quiet, before returning to the barn. The dance continued until late in the night, and by the time they rode home, Tessa was exhausted but exhilarated. The next weeks were busy as they prepared for the arrival of Samuel's brother. They cleaned the house from top to bottom, repaired loose boards on the porch, and even added a fresh coat of paint to the front door. Tessa threw herself into learning to cook better, practicing recipes from the cookbook that had belonged to Samuel's mother. Samuel told her more about his brother during those weeks. His name was Simon, and he was 3 years older than Samuel. They had been close as boys, but the loss of their family had driven a wedge between them, or perhaps driven them too far apart to find their way back together. I hope he has forgiven me for leaving, Samuel said one evening as they worked together to repair the fence line. I am sure he has. Family forgives. That is what family does. Your family did not forgive you. Tessa paused in her work. My stepmother is not family, not really. And my father made his choice when he chose her over me. But that does not change what I believe about real family. Real family finds a way back to each other. Samuel looked at her with such tenderness that her breath caught. I love you, Tessa. I do not think I have said it yet, but I do. I love you. Tears pricked at her eyes. I love you too. I think I have loved you since you opened your door and pulled me in from the storm. He kissed her then, long and deep, the fence repair forgotten. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Samuel grinned. We should probably finish this fence before dark. Probably, Tessa agreed, but neither of them moved for several long moments. Simon and his family arrived on a bright day in late June. Tessa stood on the porch beside Samuel, watching the wagon approach, and felt his tension in the rigid set of his shoulders. It will be all right, she murmured, taking his hand. I hope so. The wagon pulled up in front of the house, and a man climbed down from the driver's seat. He looked remarkably like Samuel, with the same dark hair and strong features, though his face was fuller and less weathered. Behind him, a woman emerged holding a small girl of about 3. The two brothers stood frozen for a moment, just staring at each other. Then Simon smiled and Samuel smiled back, and they were suddenly moving toward each other, meeting in a fierce embrace. Little brother, Simon said, his voice thick with emotion. I cannot believe I found you. I cannot believe you looked, Samuel replied. Of course I looked. You are my brother, I never stopped looking. Simon pulled back, gripping Samuel's shoulders. You look good, happy. I am, I have a good life here. Samuel turned and held out his hand to Tessa. "And I have a wife. Tessa, this is my brother Simon. Simon, this is Tessa." "It is wonderful to meet you," Tessa said warmly. "Samuel has told me so much about you. All good things, I hope." Simon turned to his own family. "This is my wife Margaret and our daughter Lucy." Margaret was a petite woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Lucy hid behind her mother's skirts, peeking out shyly at the strangers. "Please, come inside," Tessa said. "You must be tired from your journey. I have cold lemonade and cookies." They all trooped inside, and soon the house was filled with the sound of voices and laughter. The brothers caught up on years of lost time, while Tessa and Margaret became acquainted and Lucy slowly warmed up enough to explore. "Your home is lovely," Margaret said as she helped Tessa prepare dinner that evening. "And Samuel seems so happy." Simon was worried he would find his brother bitter or broken. "He had his share of struggles, I think, but he is strong. He built something good here. With your help, I suspect." Margaret smiled. "Simon told me Samuel was alone out here for years. It must have been lonely." "It was. But we found each other, and now we are building a life together." The visit stretched from a few days to a week, and then to 2 weeks. The brothers were inseparable, riding out together to check on the cattle, working side by side to repair equipment and tend to the animals. Tessa and Margaret became fast friends, sharing stories and recipes and dreams for the future. Little Lucy attached herself to Tessa, following her around and helping with chores in her enthusiastic, if not always helpful way. "You are good with her," Margaret observed one afternoon as they watched Lucy collect eggs from the chicken coop with Tessa's guidance. "Do you and Samuel plan to have children? We have not talked about it much, but yes, I would like children. I think Samuel would too, though he has not said so directly. He would make a good father. Simon says he practically raised him and their sister after their mother got sick, before the fever took them all." Tessa had not known that. Samuel rarely spoke of those days, and she had not wanted to press. "He never told me that." "Samuel keeps his pain close," Simon says. "Always has, but you seem to have found a way through his walls." Finally, the day came when Simon and his family had to leave. They all stood in the yard, saying their goodbyes, promising to write and visit again soon. "I am glad I found you," Simon said, embracing Samuel one last time. "I am glad you are happy." "Me too. Thank you for not giving up on me." After the wagon disappeared down the road, Samuel and Tessa stood together in the silence, waving until they could no longer see their guests. "That was good," Samuel said quietly, "having them here, having family again. It was very good, and you have family now, Samuel. You have Simon and Margaret and Lucy, and you have me." He turned to her, his eyes serious. "I do have you, and I am grateful for it every single day." Summer faded into fall and fall into winter. Tessa learned to can vegetables from their garden, to preserve meat, to prepare for the long cold months ahead. She became more confident on horseback, able to ride out with Samuel to check on the herd without fear. She made friends in town, particularly with a young woman named Emma who ran the bakery, and she began to feel truly settled in her new life. In January, she realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. She waited, not wanting to get her hopes up, but when another month passed, she knew. She was pregnant. She told Samuel one evening after dinner, simply and directly, "I am going to have a baby." He stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face, transforming him. "A baby, you are certain?" "I am certain." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "A baby, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "I am terrified and overjoyed in equal measure. But yes, Tessa, I am very happy." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into spring. Samuel became almost comically protective, barely letting her lift anything heavier than a teacup, insisting she rest constantly. Tessa found it both endearing and exasperating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one day in March. "I can still work." "I know you can, but I worry." "I know you do. But Samuel, women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine." He pulled her close, his hand resting on her swelling belly. "I lost my whole family once. I cannot lose you too." "You will not lose me, I promise." In late April, almost exactly 1 year after she had arrived during that blizzard, Tessa went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when she feared Samuel's worries would prove prophetic. But finally, as dawn broke over the Montana plains, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Samuel held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect." "Tessa, he is perfect. What should we name him?" Tessa asked, exhausted but elated. Samuel looked up at her, his eyes shining. "What about Stephen, after my father, Stephen York? I love it." They settled into life as parents, navigating the challenges of sleepless nights and endless feedings together. Samuel proved to be a devoted father, spending hours just watching Stephen sleep, marveling at every little sound and movement. "I never knew I could love someone this much," he told Tessa one night as they sat together, watching their son sleep in the cradle Samuel had carved. "I love you both so much it terrifies me." "Love is terrifying," Tessa agreed, "but it is also wonderful and worth the fear." Simon and his family came to visit that summer, bringing gifts for the baby and congratulations for the new parents. Lucy, now 4, was fascinated by her baby cousin, wanting to hold him and help care for him constantly. "You have built something beautiful here," Simon told Samuel as they sat on the porch one evening watching the sunset. "A home, a family, a life. I am proud of you, little brother. I could not have done it without Tessa. She is my anchor, my partner in everything. Hold on to that." Good partnerships are rare and precious. The years that followed were full of joy and challenge in equal measure. Tessa and Samuel had 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah when Stephen was 3, and another son named Daniel 2 years after that. The ranch grew and prospered, the herd expanding, the house growing to accommodate their growing family. There were hard times too. A drought one year that nearly broke them, requiring them to sell off part of the herd and tighten their belts. An injury that laid Samuel up for weeks, forcing Tessa to manage the ranch largely on her own while caring for 3 small children. The death of Parson Williams, who had married them all those years ago, and the grief that came with losing a friend. But through it all, they had each other. They had built something strong and lasting, a partnership forged in that blizzard and tempered by time and experience. One evening, 15 years after Tessa had arrived in Montana, she and Samuel sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Stephen was 17 now, tall and strong, already talking about starting his own place someday. Sarah was 14, quick and clever with plans to become a teacher. Daniel was 12, still all energy and mischief, keeping them on their toes. "You ever regret it?" Samuel asked suddenly. "Leaving Philadelphia, coming out here to marry a stranger?" Tessa looked at him, at the man she had built a life with, the father of her children, her partner and best friend. "Not for a single moment. This is where I was always meant to be. With you." He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I think about that day sometimes. You showing up half frozen on my doorstep, looking like a drowned cat, telling me you were my bride." "I did not look like a drowned cat." "You absolutely did. But even then, even half frozen and desperate, there was something about you. Something strong and determined. I knew right away you were going to turn my life upside down." "Did I?" "You did. In the best possible way." He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, fitting against him perfectly as she always had. "I love you, Tessa York. More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. I love you too. Always." They sat together as the sun set, painting the Montana sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and gold, their children's laughter floating on the evening breeze. Tessa thought about the girl she had been, alone and desperate in Philadelphia, answering an advertisement from a stranger. She thought about the terrifying journey west, the blizzard, the moment Samuel had opened his door and pulled her inside. She had come to Montana seeking survival, seeking a way forward when all paths seemed closed. Instead, she had found a home, a family, a love deeper and truer than she had ever imagined possible. She had found warmth by Samuel's fire that went beyond the physical, warmth that had sustained her through every challenge and hardship. The mail-order bride who had arrived during a blizzard had become so much more. She had become a rancher's wife, a mother, a pillar of her community. But most importantly, she had become herself, fully and completely, in a way that had never been possible before. As darkness fell and Samuel stood to usher their children inside for the night, Tessa took one last look at the land that had become hers. The wide open plains, the distant mountains, the big sky that seemed to go on forever. It was beautiful and harsh and unforgiving, this Montana territory, but it was home, and she would not change a single thing.